Mhm. Okay, so I think the recording is started. Okay, in this tutorial we will see the front-end code of ORKG, and also we'll see how to use React to fetch some data from our API. I will share my screen first. Do you see my screen?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, great. So ORKG front-end code is hosted in GitLab, as you know. So we will take a look at this code structure, and also we'll see how to fetch the API from this React. First of all, I would like to mention the requirements. So before you start the front end, you need the Node.js this version or greater, and you need to set up your default environment variables. So you need to create a copy of default.env, and you create your own .env, and then you parameterize those variables. The most important variables is this server URL, which is the URL of the backend, and also we have the similarity service URL, which is the service for the comparison feature. Yeah, and also if you are going to use your own instance of backend, make sure that you have all the default classes and properties, and you can use this Python snippet. We have this Python snippet, and it will create all the needed classes and properties of ORKG. For this course, I'm going to use the public endpoint API, so I don't have to run this snippet or to create those classes and properties. And yeah, so then you can just run, after installing all the dependencies, you can just run npm run start, and it will start the server locally. Okay, let me open my terminal. So I will open the editor. Okay, so now I'm in the master branch. When you clone the repository, you will get this code. And as I said, you have to create a copy for this file, and it contains all the environment variables. And if you need the explanation for this environment variables, you can just go to README file, and you can see there the description of each one of these variables. Yeah, as we said, the most important thing is server URL and also the similarity service URL. If I open my .env, so I already have a copy for this file. Maybe I have some variables that are commented out. So I can show you here that I'm going to use the public endpoint of ORKG and also the similarity service URL. If you are planning to add some data to ORKG, just for testing, it's better to create to run your own instance of the backend. But in this tutorial, I'm just planning to fetch data and not insert new data in ORKG. So it's fine that I use the public endpoint. To run the server, as we said, we just need to run npm run start. Okay, now I'm going to explain the code structure of ORKG frontend. First of all, the main folder is src, which contains the source code of the front end. We will explain those files and how we structure them, and build and public, and also some files here are related to either configuration or deployment setup, or some generated files, auto-generated files like the changelog. So in the changelog, we have the list of changes in ORKG versions, and it's automatically generated. Yeah, so the most important here, as we said, is .env for the environment variables. And we have also package.json. So this package.json, it contains all the packages or external libraries that we are using in JavaScript. And here you can find the package name and also its version. I can show you maybe some of the important packages that we are using. So as you can see.
Sorry, I have a question. Maybe you don't see it in the screen because you're sharing your screen, but
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed that you have some this hands up. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask if before it went ahead. So for the similarity service public endpoint, the URL there I saw is Simcom. So it goes to the, yeah, so that's the one. I just tried it on my browser and I got, maybe I tried an incorrect one, but I tried this and that's correct.
Yeah, it's correct.
Okay, okay, fantastic. It just seemed a little bit okay.
Is there any other question?
Yes, so I have a question on this package. Can you go back to that screen? Yes. Okay.
The package.json?
Yes. So when you, it means that all these files are not generated automatically. You basically wrote it yourself, like the
This
version of
package,
the external libraries.
So this package, it explains what is inside this repository as a JavaScript project, and also it lists all the dependencies. And I can show you some other settings. Here we have the scripts. So when you run npm, when we wrote npm run, if we type start, it will run this command. So this is like the mapping between what we wrote in the run and also its command. And if I run test, it will run React scripts test. And you have also the linter if and also for the version. So I told you that we are generating this changelog file automatically. And this is the command responsible for generating this file. So if I want to create a new changelog, I just run npm run version. So it will run this command automatically. And yeah, we have some configuration also on the package.json. Does that reply to your question or?
Yeah, partially. The other part is just like, let's say that someone is trying to add a new package. Does he have to come and add it manually here, or this is generated somehow automatically?
You can say it's edited automatically by using npm commands. Let's say if I want to install a new package in ORKG, I mean, I want to use another package. If I do npm install, and then I put the name of the package, let's say here React Helmet. So if I want to install this package, it will be installed in my local machine, right? But it will not update the package.json. If I want to update the package.json automatically, I can say --save. So that will add React Helmet automatically on the list of dependencies. And when I commit my code, it will be part of the package.json. So anyone will install ORKG will also install this one.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And if you want to check the version, you can also see it here. I think you can also install a specific version by just putting here and then you can specify the version, which version you want to install from this package. And it will be fixed as well here. So this is for the package.json. Is there any other question? Okay, then I guess we can continue. Yeah, so for the dependencies, we have a hands-on table. We are using it, I think, on the PDF extractor to show some table to extract reviews. And we have citation.js. This is a library that we are using to extract or to parse bibtex and also to get metadata of DOIs. We have TPGS, so this is the library that we are using for the tooltips that you see in our interface. Yeah. We have this GUI, so this is the responsible for data validation. So when you see, like, if you select an integer and then you say you type text, the validation of that text we are doing it using this library. Can show you another library. So of course we are using React. This is the current version that we are using. And so this is we are for the visualization we are using React Google Charts. For the
I have a question, Kay. What was React Helmet used for? That
React Helmet is actually it's a search engine optimization library. So it will inject some metadata on the document itself. If you are wondering what is the library we are using here, you can just copy it and then go to Google and type npm like this. So here's the library that we are using, and you can find the description how to use it in your project.
Yeah, thank you.
And all these libraries are open source, so if you want to see the source code, you can just go here or click on issues maybe. Yeah, you see here it's in GitHub, and also you can find the tutorials or the parameters that you can use in this package. As you can see, when you install the new package, they say you have to use this .save to save it in your package.json. Yeah. So this is, I guess, the most. Yeah, we have also React Select. So when you see the autocomplete, we are using this library. And if I am interested to see how to use this library, I can just go to and search for it. So this is the library that we are using. And you can see here also there is documentation how I can use it and how I can customize it. Yeah, and most important, I think, also is this React strap, and it's just a wrapper for Bootstrap. Maybe I need this during this tutorial. I will just go to their documentation. And yeah, I guess this is it for the package JSON. Is there any other question for this part? Okay. So for the widget, is any code related to the widgets, the widget that we have in ORKG? And let's go to SRC. SRC, it contains the source code of ORKG frontend. First, we have the folder actions, and this, I would say, this actions folder and also reducers, they are folders that group our files related to React Redux. And to understand what is React Redux, is just a library that allows us to manage a global state of React application. During this course, we will see local states, and we see how to use them. And this is just another library that allows us to use global states on our React application. We will take a look maybe at the end of this course about what is inside actions and reducers. And mostly we are using this global states for the authentication and for the managing templates, adding a paper, statement browser, and view paper. And we are planning also to use the React Redux on Compassion. For the assets, it contains all the images or CSS configurations like SSC, CSS, and also some templates like for the CSV import. The images, it contains the logo and some images that we are showing in the interface. This is for the assets. For the component, it contains the component or reusable components of ORKG. As you can see here, we have a lot of components. We have the component for author card. We have the autocomplete. So you can reuse those components actually. And this is for the components. And for the constants, this is where we put our constant values in the front end. The most important file in this folder is graph settings. So here you can see that we are, thank you, Hassan. So for graph settings, it contained all the fixed IDs of the default predicates and also classes. So if you notice that in the beginning of this call, we showed this Python snippet, and it will create those predicates and those classes actually. And we have data types. So this is where we put the data types. Yeah, I think you'll notice that from the interface, we have a data type called resource. We have also text, we have decimal, integer, and also Boolean. And this is how we validate the values. So as we said, we are using Chewy to validate the data of those types. Yeah, maybe we have here also rejects, and we are putting here some regular expressions that we are using in the front end. So we don't have to define them in each component. We can just import them from here. And we have routes. We will today we will touch this file because we will add a new page in ORKG. And this is just the routes for the CMS, or our content management system. Basically, it's everything related to the help center. Yeah, so libs, it contains some code related to the visualization, like graph visualization or the visualization of comparisons. And for the pages, here we have a separated file for each page in ORKG. So if you have like a specific page in ORKG, we have its equivalent JavaScript file in this folder, pages. So today we will create a new file here because we are going to create a new page. The reducers, we said that it's related to React Redux, and we have the services. Here, the services, it's like the connecting point to external APIs. For this folder, I would like to show you first a schema of the front end. So basically in ORKG, we have some services, internal services, which are below this dotted line. So we have the backend, we have the similarity and comparison service, and we have the annotation. And we have also some component like a Grobit and Strapi. And basically, these are our instances, and we manage them. And we have also some external APIs or external service providers like ORKG, GeoNames, Crossref, and OLS. And each one of these services, we have its own folder here. So as you can see in services, we have Altimetric. And here we just create a function that it's connect to that API and get some data. So we just wrapping that API, and we create function for them. So we can just call that function to call that service and get the response. So for the altimetric, we have this get altmetrics for the UI, and we are using the altimetric URL that we provided in the environment variable. We have annotation service here to get the annotation. We have also a folder specific for the backend. Sorry, here we have the backend endpoints. We have basically for each part of the backend API its own file. So maybe I can open classes. So for the classes, we have this function called get class by ID. So it needs only one parameter, which is the ID, and it will get request to this URL, which is the backend API / classes, and / it will give also the ID. We have an endpoint or a function to create a class, and it will send the submit request. And those HTML method requests, we are defining them in network folder file. So if I go down a bit, here we have the network file. It contains all these HTTP methods. We have submit, get request, post request, put, and also delete request. Yeah, basically this is for the backend. We have observatories, organization, resources. Yeah, today we will use the resources functions. Basically, we will use this get resource. Yeah, so this is for the services. As we said, we have each external service also its own folder here. We have OLS and ORCID and the similarity service. Yeah, and yeah, as you know, any application has its own entry point. So in ORKG, there is this index.js. So here, as you can see, we just put our main components like the cookie provider, maybe the statistic package, and also for the theme for styled components. Yeah, and then this will use the app. And app is also here we initialize our layout. So we are using this component default layout, which will add the footer and header of the interface. And yeah, we have this routes.config, which links the paths to the component used, and we will touch in this folder today as well. And the rest is just configuration settings for testing, or maybe common functions like in utils. So here we have some common or most used some utils functions of ORKG frontend. So we have some get parameter from query string, and here the documentation how to use these functions. And yeah, we have also this required authentication. So if I want to make some component require authentication, I can just store up that page or that component within this function, and then it will be only visible for authenticated users. So as you can see here, I check first if the user is connected, and if it's connected, I show the component. Otherwise, I show a notarized component. So this is mainly the structure code of ORKG frontend. Is there any question? Solomon? Yes?
Yes, thank you. So far, it's really amazing. On the services, there is a database. So can you maybe, is it data site or database?
Yeah, data site.
Data set. Oh, okay. I saw wrongly because I was wondering what was a database service, given that we are using the backend. But yeah, I read wrongly data site. Yeah, I think this is to get the citation, isn't it?
Yeah, this is to get the citation basically for, I think, yeah, let me show you something. So here in the services, if you are wondering where this function is used, so I can use the search function of the code editor. I can copy this name, get citation by DY, and use the search function. So here I see that this or data site generally is used in export citation in Compagine. So when you export this the citation for the Compagine, we will use this data site service. Does that clarify? Okay,
Yes,
great.
thank you.
Thank you. Golsa?
So if we want to use the OCUM service or use some ontologies, and for example, now we need this QUDT ontology, which is not in OLS service. Shall we have another package for that too? Or for
So if they have already the API,
yeah, they have.
You can maybe create a folder here.
Okay,
inside services. Yeah, and then you add an environment variable in default.env, like here. You say, let's say if you have already the API for this UCOM units, you can just say here UCOM unit, and you put the URL in this variable, and then you try to document it in the README file. So when the deployment, if someone wants to deploy this application, he knows what to set on that environment variable. And then, yeah, you can create, as we said, you can create a folder in the services, and then you define the functions that you use, like convert from centimeter to meter or something. And then you just call that function, and that function, it will be responsible to call that API and get the response. And inside your component, you will use that function to get the conversion result, and then you display it to the user or do any treatment with that value.
Yeah, and what about for the autocomplete? Because I need the autocomplete service for system for example, when user is writing a unit, how can I use that package too?
So as we said, first you need to connect to that service using this way. I mean, this process. You just need to create some function that connects to that endpoint.
You mean the
API
service?
Yes. And for the autocomplete, as we said, mostly in ORKG, we are using React Select. So if you open the documentation of React Select, you see here the documentation how to use the React Select for by using a service. I can show you here async. So here you see async component to load options from a remote source as the user types. So when the user types in this autocomplete, he will get the options of that autocomplete from a server or remote source. So the remote source in your case is this API, and then it will load the options. So when the user types, it will load the options from that external service. And if you want to take a look at the code, you can just click here. You see source code, and then you see how to configure or how to use that component.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question related to this one? Okay, thank you. Then we will pass to the second part of this tutorial. We will create a new page in ORKG. So here I'm in the master branch. I will first, before I create new feature or add anything to ORKG, I have to create a new branch. I will just type git checkout -b, and let's call it nodes. Yeah, first of all, I want to show you what we are going to create. So we'll have at least the goal of our tutorial. So we will create a new page in ORKG, and it will be under /nodes, and we will try to show the list of resources on that endpoint. Yeah. So basically the nodes of our application or the nodes in the database. And we will also try to show the ID and the link to the resource of that ID and the label of the resource and maybe the creator as well. Yes, so I will just create it here, a new branch. I will just create a new branch here called nodes. Okay, now I don't need this files. Okay. If I want to create a new page, as we said in ORKG, I have to go to pages. Here we have a folder specific called pages. I will create new file here, and let's call it nodes.js. I will just add boilerplate code, RFC. Okay. So to create a new component in React, you can just define a function, and then you put a return inside this function. This return is basically what you want to print in the interface. I will just type here nodes. So here I defined my component or my page. It's called nodes. Now I want to define where the user can find this page. And to do that, I have to edit a file in constants, and it's called routes here. So here I will add just a new key object. I will name it nodes, and then it's under nodes. Okay. So now any user, if he access this URL nodes, we want to open our function or our component. So to do that, we have to link this value with this component. And to do that, we have to edit a file. It's called routes config. So we will add new line here or a new object on this array of routes to define our new page. Basically, I have to import first this component. I would say import nodes from. I will give it the path of this component. So it's inside pages, and there is nodes JS file. So I import this, and then I say link. I will just add new object here. I will say if the user go to this path, which is routes nodes, which is defined here. Sorry, it's defined here. Here we have routes and we have nodes. So if the user goes to routes nodes, we will open the component nodes. So this is how we linked this path to this component. So we said to React, if someone goes to /nodes, it will open the nodes component. If I go and try that, let me first open ORKG local. So if I say /nodes, you see here it rendered the component nodes. Now I have nodes here. If I say in this component return hello, it will print hello here, as you can see. Okay. Is there any question in regard to this point? Okay, now I will continue to try to edit this page. So first I want this hello in the middle in the container. We have, as we said, we are using React Strap library, and there is some components that we can use from here. So there is a component called container. I will just use it here. Container. As you can see, this container will just try to centralize our text in the middle of the screen, or it will create like put an element in the middle of the screen. We have container, it's from React Strap. And if I go to my page, I will see it will start from here instead of from here. Now, if I want to add something like this one that we have in ORKG, which is this white box, I will just use the class name. So basically, this is GSX, and GSX is just the template engine for React. It's mostly HTML code, and just for class name, they have this. For class, they rename it with the class name. Yeah. So if I say here box, so box, this class name is already defined in ORKG, so it will create just a box and put this hello in the middle of it. And if I want some padding on the edges of this box, I will just use P4, which is padding for on all directions. I mean, bottom left and right and left. Bottom right and right. So here we have the paddings, and they can also make this box rounded. So I can just say here, it's rounded box. Yeah, you see here, it becomes a rounded box. Okay, so this is how we can create the page in ORKG. Okay. Now I want to explain another concept in React, which is states. So actually, I can create a variable here, and let's say it's called count, and we put the value 0. And if I want to print it, I can just put it on the curly brackets. And when I say hello, it will print hello 0 because, sorry, because count contains the value 0 here. Let's imagine if I want to create a button, and that button will update this count. I need something called hooks. And for that, I will use something from React. I will import it here, import. It's called useState from React. And inside my function, this is how the syntax, how to define this state. Use state, sorry, here. And I will name this state count. And to set this the value of this count, I will name a function called set count. I don't need this anymore. So this is basically how to create a hook in React. So in useState, you have to pass the parameter, the default value of this count. So we said we want to initialize it as 0. So basically what React will do, we'll create a variable called count, and it will be static or constant. And if I want to update that value, I have to use the function set count. So I can use set count, and then I pass the parameter that I want to set that value. So if I set count 1, the count will contain the value 1, and so on. And if I want to update the value or increment that value, I can say define a function here, and that function will return the value that we want to set to that variable. If I say C+1, that means it will take the previous value, which is this, it's in C, and then C+1, it will be an incrementation of the value count. Okay. Now let's add a button here. I will also use React Strap to add the button. And let's print or say plus. And we define an event on click. And we say when the user clicks on this button, we will increment the counter, set count. And we say that it has to be just +1. I have to import also the button from React Strap. Yeah. Now, if I go to my page, I see here I have a button, and there is 0 as a default value. Sorry, because I have to refresh the page. So I had to define this 0 to 1, and so on. So basically, React, when we created this hook, it will detect any changes on the value. And if there is any change on this constant value, it will update, re-render the component. So when the user clicks here, we update the counter. React will automatically update, re-render this component because this variable is changed. So this is what happened now. So if I click here, it will just re-render the component. A new div element, and then I will use some margin on the top. Margin 3. Okay. And let's put this inside a header. Let's use h4. Okay, now we have a button, and when I click on this button, it will increment the value. If I want to decrease the value, I can use another button and just name it 1 and say decrement that value with 1. And when the user clicks on this minus, it will decrement that value. So minus here and plus. Yeah. So as we said, we have already some component defined.
Quick question. Sorry.
Yep.
If you can show us the code again, you define both count and set count as constants, right?
No, actually, this is the syntax of using a React hooks. So when you use this use state, you put between the parentheses the default value or the initial value of your variable count.
Okay.
And the second parameter is the function that you use to update the value of that constant.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe a follow up on that. Can that function be anything, or it need to be set?
Yeah, I can set number, but I have one I want to update. I use that function name here. I can name it anything. So also for this count, I can name it anything. So this is, yeah.
Maybe another question.
Yes.
If I have custom logic, can I append it to this?
What do you mean by custom logic?
Let's say I need to do some sort of verification, or I don't increase more than 10. So can I append something to the hook, or I need to
yes,
myself
so
individually
basically
specify the function?
Yeah, basically this is a JavaScript code. So you can say, let's imagine here, if C is greater than 10, then I will use it here. I will just use maybe 5 here. And not C, but count. Okay, so what they define it here, so when the user clicks on minus, it will only decrement if the value is greater than 5. And if it's less than 5, it will do nothing, just return null.
Yeah, but this logic is basically external, right?
External,
so
yes.
You're doing it for, I don't know, whatever you're calling this event. What I had in mind is there some way to like monkey patch this behavior into the function?
Yes, there is a possibility. So the idea is that you can create custom hooks. So basically, you will define a function. Let's say function here. Let's call it custom hook. And basically, this is our hook. And it will take an initial value in it. And then we say it has a state. It's called function custom hook. That is either a React function component. Okay. Oh, sorry. I'll try to define a custom hook so I can create my own hook for this case. I guess I have to create a folder for this one. Okay, we'll define new one here.
No worries then. I guess it's not a big deal. Just go on with whatever you were.
Yeah, I will show you how to create a custom hook after when we finish this part.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, what we were. Yeah, I want to show you also something else related to hooks, and also you can do it from this function. So you can use effect, and you say when the counter change, and you say here if count is greater than 10, you can maybe set it to 0. Set number to 0. Or let's say just 5. And remove this code, custom code. Okay. I have to import use effect from here. And okay, I will try to explain this. So this is another hook which called use effect, and React will run this code if one of the variables of the dependencies in this array will change. So React will detect if the count change, it will run this function. Basically here, if the count becomes greater than 5, it will set the number to 0. And if I go to my page and then I click increment this 5 times, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if I click one more, it will return to 0 because in my use effect, I said when the counter change, and if it's greater than 5, I set it to 0, as you can see here. So this is to detect the changes in your hooks and also to do some effects. Okay. Yeah. Now, if I want, as we said, we want to use some components from this library. We have a button group, and this will just make them in a better style. I will use basically this button group. And as you can see here, we have 2 buttons. They are in the same group. I can also write a custom code based on the value of count. So I can say style. Let's say color. Green. Let's say if the counter is greater than or greater than or equal to 0, I put that number in green. Otherwise, I will use the red color if it's less than 0. Now you see that it's greater than 0, so it's green. And if I go beyond 0, it will red color. So basically, this is how React works. I mean, just a basic example. Is there any question related to this? Okay, I will continue. So now, yeah. Now we are going to use the backend API. So we have the backend API documentation. It's on this page. I will share this link with you later on. So this is the documentation of ORKG backend. And yeah, for each call we have here how to call the statement or how to list the statements, how to create new statement, how to delete. So basically this is the documentation. And we have also the resources. And this resources, if you want to get the resources, you need to call this endpoint. As we said, we have in ORKG the folder services, which contains all the backend calls. We try to update this synchronously with what's happened as new updates in the backend as well. So we have a file called resources, and here we have some functions. So we have this function called get resources. Inside my component, I want, let's say, to fetch all the resources in ORKG. To do that, I have first to define a function. Let's call it fetch data. And okay, and I want to get all or use the function get resources. Okay, so get resources, according to the API, it needs the page number. Let's use the page 0. And it also needs the number of items. I will just show maybe 10 items. And to fetch this data, I have to call the endpoint. Okay. Let me first maybe create a variable, and I put the result inside this variable. So I will call the backend and get the result and put the result in result console. I will try to refresh the page and check the console. Okay. So as you can see here, I don't have any console log because I didn't call this function yet. So to call this function, I have to call it when it re-render the component. Okay. As you can see here, I have some printing of that variable, which is the result. And if I click on this plus button, it will recall that endpoint again. But I don't want this behavior because I want only to fetch one time, and then if it re-renders the component, I don't have to call that again. For this one, I will use just use effect the same. But for the dependencies variable, I will keep it empty. So it will only run this function when it renders the component the first time. So I have use effect and I say there is no dependencies. And when the first time render this component, run this function, which fetch data. Okay, I will clean the console, try to refresh. As you can see here, I have now the printing of that console. And if I click plus, if the React re-render this component, it will not call the backend again because I said only show it once or only run that function once. Yes. So now, as you can see here, I have a promise. So this is a promise, and React what it did. So it called that function, but it will go directly to the next command. So here I have, it will call this endpoint or use this function get resources and directly goes here before getting the response because that call it's async. So it will call the backend, but it will not wait. It will just run the instruction after that. So to wait for the response of this call, I make tell JavaScript, please wait first for the response of this call. I will just add here wait. And wait, I'm only allowed to use it inside async function. So basically what will happen, it will wait the response from the server, and then it will print the result. And if I try to refresh the page, you will see now I have the real response from the server. So as the documentation says, we have, as a response, you will get the content, and it's a list of the items, and we have some pagination parameters. Okay. Yes. So Is there any question related to this? Okay, now I want to print, let's say I want to print this result. Let's call maybe this is the nodes, and I don't need this anymore. And let's say here we create a table. I will use also React Shop. We have a component called table. This is just a boilerplate code for tables. I will add a header line. I will say th. I have to close this one, t-hat, and t-body, and t-body. Table. Okay, what is the error here?
Second th is not closed.
Yeah, basically, so this is an XML. It's if you have like an open element, you have to close it as well. tr, and then we have td. Okay. Yeah, basically this is just an empty table. It contains one column, it's called ID, and we have just one row, it's called test. Now I want to print the nodes inside my table. I will just use a function here. I will map on the values, so we have nodes, and they know that all my elements are inside the content. So I will say nodes dot content, and then I map on them. So we have here a node, and then for each node, I want to print one element. Okay, I want, let's say for the node, I want to print the ID. So I type here node dot ID. Okay, here I have to set the value of nodes. So basically, at this stage, I don't React doesn't know what is nodes. So it's inside this, it's encapsulated inside this bracket. So I have to define a new hook. It's called let's call it nodes, and then we say set nodes, and as custom or default value, it's content is equal to an empty array. So by default, nodes, it will contain a content with an empty array. And after calling this endpoint, I want to set the result inside nodes. So I will use this set nodes and say this is the result. So what will happen? It will first, when it renders, it will set 0 to count and an empty array content to nodes. And it will call the function fetch data, and after calling that function and get the result, it will set the result inside the object nodes. Basically, it will be here. And then when it renders the component, it will go to content and then tries to map the elements that are inside that array. If I refresh my page here, okay. As you can see here, I have the elements. Basically, it gets 10 elements from the backend. I will try to enhance a bit this, so I will print the ID, the label. Maybe I will try to use striped here and bordered. Okay. And let's add new column here and say print the label as well. Okay. So basically, I called the API to get the list of resources, basically 10 items or 10 resources. I can improve this, so I called only, I got only the first page. I can maybe change this button and show only one button, which loads more pages for these resources. I will remove one of the buttons, and let's say when the user, let's call it load more. And when the user clicks on this button, I want to call the function fetch data. And let's put another hook, and we set the current page. Current page. And let's call it set current page. And here inside, let's edit this function and add another parameter. Let's call it page. And we pass that parameter. So at the first stage, we call with the parameter 0. So it will first load the first page. And I call the API and say load the first page, or the page number 0. And after that, yeah, we can say here current page +1. So so what will happen? It will initialize the value to 0, and then it will call get the first page of the nodes. And when the user clicks on load more, it will call the function fetch data, but the page number is +1. But we want also, when the user gets the result, we want to update the current page to the next number, or we increment that value. So let's call it C here, P or C +1. So basically, we will increment the page number after getting the result from the backend. And we want also, when we render this page at the first time, we want to initialize this to set nodes to an empty array. I will just get rid of this content, so it will be easy to manage the states, or to add the content of the first page to the content of the second page. I will just convert this to an array and directly map the nodes instead of mapping the content. Another thing I will need to check. So yeah, here. So basically, when we get the result from the backend, we need to prev result or prev nodes and use the spread operator of of the JavaScript. I will show you how to do that. So basically, we will create a new array. It will contain the element of the existing page, prev nodes, and we add new elements which are in the result.content. So basically, we have here an array. Sorry about that. We have an array, and we are going to update the result, or the list of nodes, by the result that we are getting from the backend. We have the previous nodes, so it will be an empty array, and then we add the elements that we have in the content. And yeah, this is it. I will try to run this code. Okay, now we have the first page, and if the user clicks on load more, as we said here, we will call the function fetch data, but we will increment the current page +1. Yeah, as you can see here, it will update or it will append the page 2, or the second page, to the result of the page 1 because of this line. Basically, it will get the result and add it to the previous result, and so on. Yeah. And if I check the network, I can see that it is loading the pages. So here it's on page 6. I can show, yeah, now it's page 7, and so on. Is there any question related to this part?
I have one.
Yeah.
So you showed the await of the promise.
Yes.
And my question is how, I mean, technically you have it. If you have a long IO operation, you need to show some waiting indicator or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't want to await it, rather to check the status, and depending on that, show different behavior.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So to do that, we can create a new variable, and it's a Boolean variable. Let's call it true. Here, is it loading? and let's say set is loading. Okay. And first, let's set it to false. So basically here I created a new hook and it's a Boolean value, and I set it by default to false. And when before I start loading, I set this to true. So I will tell JavaScript or React that now it's loading before I call this call or before I call the backend. And after it finishes, I say, let's put it the third one and say is loading to false. So basically we have a variable that it contains the value true when it starts loading, and it will set to false once it finishes. And here, let's say I print here if is loading. Okay, I will just use Turner operator to say if it's loading, it is loading. Result. Okay. Now if I print this, I will try to minimize the number of items just to show you that it. So basically I changed this. So you see here, now it's not loading. So we see the result because we said here, if it's not loading, show a result, otherwise show it's loading. And so when I click load more, it will change to it's loading. And then when it's finished, it will change again to a result. So this is the way how you can set some flag that it's loading or not.
So I have a question too.
Sorry, does that reply to your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was maybe wondering about the current page. Mm-hmm. So you have a constant there, current page, and then no, I mean in the code, yes. Mm-hmm. And then you have the set current page function. And in fact, it seems like they're sort of used in two different places. So the set current page function is used in fetch data, the user-defined hook, and the current page constant variable is used at the bottom where you have the button click. So could you maybe explain the connection between the two, if it's possible?
Okay. Yes. So this function, fetch data, it will use a parameter called page. So this parameter is not connected to current page at all. So it's just a function that uses current its own parameter. And when I pass that parameter, it will read that parameter and use it to call the backend. So basically, this is separated from the current page. But current page, I'm using it as an indicator to in which page I'm currently in. So when the user clicks on load more, I want to load the next page of the current page. So the first time when I load, it will increment that. And then when the user clicks on it, it will increment that as well. And at the beginning, at the very beginning, I'm using here the value 0. So it will call fetch data, but the value will be, the page number will be 0.
Okay, I see. And what about this variable C within the set current page? Is there any connection between that and the current page variable at the bottom?
Actually, yes. So here, C is just like a name of the previous variable. So if I say here current page +1, here, I can do that, but the problem is that React will arise an error because we are using a value that it's not defined in the dependencies, because this may prone to error. Like so, it will maybe use a noded state of current page. So it's a recommended way that you say to this hook that it needs to update the current value and not maybe a value that it comes from a noded state. So that's why maybe I can name it here prev current page. So basically here I have like the previous value of current page, which is the in current page, and say that value, the previous current page, I just increment it. So this is basically on my experience. So I try to use always the previous state to update my state if it's they are related. So basically now I want to increment the value, so I use the previous state.
Okay, I got a sense. Thank you.
Sure. Is there any other question? Yeah, let's add, maybe show the number of elements here. So we show how many resources we have on this page. Let's say we have here 10. And we have in the result. Okay, let's create a new hook. It's called num elements. Or we can just use the counter, our counter. Set count or set number, and we say it's a result dot. If we check the backend API, we have here number of elements. So now I will set the value of count to the number of elements or what I get from the backend, and it will print that number. Basically, it will be always green. We don't need that. Yeah, we don't use this because we don't want to. The counter goes to 0. Move this use effect and refresh the page. Okay. So number of elements is the number of elements in our current page. If I want to get the number of the total elements in the backend, I can use this total elements instead of number of elements. Okay, now if I check the page, I see here we have 18,000 resource in ORKG. And yes. So this is for the resources. And if I want to add a new thing here, create by, I want to show who created this resource. I see here the user ID of the user who created this resource, or the creator. I will just not new, okay, created by. Okay, yeah, we have here created by. And yeah, basically, as we said in the beginning of this course, we have some components and you can reuse them. And for the users, we have defined component. It's called user avatar. Let's say I want to show the user avatar. And if I want to see the definition of this, so this is a component that you can reuse, and it will show basically the avatar of the user. And it needs one parameter, some parameters. One of them is the user ID. So we need to pass that user ID when we call this component. So user ID is equal to node.created by. So created by is gotten from the backend. As you can see here, we have for each item, we have the created by. And here I can see I see the avatar of each creator. And also I can show the label or the username. As you can see, we have parameter here, show display name, and its Boolean value. So if I say show display name, it will show the display name. And basically, this is a link that goes to the profile page. Okay.
So question.
Yes.
Regarding basically when you use the number, so the number of results, why didn't you use the nodes or so I mean, for me, the last thing on my mind would be to create a hook for it. I mean, since you already kind of have the response, right?
Yes.
Why didn't you?
But Yeah, I can do that, but it will only give me the number of nodes, the current node. So if the first time it will be 10, and when I load a new page, it will be 20.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I'm not talking about the behavior itself. I get that, but I mean that's the thing. Why would you create a hook rather than using the raw response that you got?
Yes, that's also possible. I can say maybe instead of updating this each time I call the backend, I can say when the page is equal to 0, I can tell it to update the number of items. So this will only happen once. But to your question, why we used hook? So if I say here, let's say I have a variable called const, and it's equal to maybe, I don't know, maybe number of elements, let's say 10, and then I want to print here 10. Basically, first of all, this is not, okay, let's do it here. Let test equal to 10. And I try to print test here, somewhere here, okay. Okay. Now I will try to remove this and say test equal to what we said again, test total elements, right? This is what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it. It stays 0, but it didn't update because React didn't detect the change of this value because it doesn't listen to changes in this value. So we are using hooks because in hooks React will detect the changes on that value and re-render that component or that part of the component.
Okay, so is it so here it's different than basically creating it or passing it as a property to the component?
Passing it as, you mean?
So yeah, basically I want somehow to pass this into the state. Sorry, not the property, but rather the state.
Which state?
Of the component. Okay, so you need to use the hook for that.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, when you use hooks, React will detect the changes of that value. And if that value it's just initialized here, basically, yeah, actually why it's now 10. The explanation is that React will re-render this component because the nodes changed. So when it re-render, it will just set again test equal to 10. So we will never end up with the real value, which is the total elements.
Because it's always reinitialized, or because it doesn't see the update?
Yes. No, it's always reinitialized. If I show something here, console log render. Okay. Now if I show the console. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, now you see the component rendered 1, 2, 3, 4. So each time we update some of the hooks, it will re-render again. So if I call load more, it will re-render. And in all these times, it will run this set again. So that's why we are already always ending up with 10 value.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So that's why we're creating hook instead of using a normal variable. And if you have like a constant in your component, you can just use a constant instead of using hooks. Does that reply to your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, maybe I can show you here. So for user avatar, as you can see here, we are calling this component, and this component has a parameter called user ID. And we have here use effect, and we said this this component will run this use effect each time the user ID changes. So for some reason, if the ID changes, we will get again the contributor information. So as you can see here, we don't update the user ID, but we will detect any changes in the user ID. And this user ID is passed as parameter to this component. Is there any other question? Okay, we'll continue. So now we have the created by. Maybe we want to create also. Okay, let's first return our pagination. We said here we have set number. I remove this. Okay, we don't need this. Okay, let's say if you want to add a link to the resource page in this, instead of showing just the ID, we can do that by importing a link component from React router. Link React router DOM, and then we say in the ID we show a link, and okay, and this link goes to actually in ORKG we are using a library called named URLs, and it has a function called reverse. And if I use this function here, basically this reverse, it will convert, it will use the parameter to create a link to that page or the target page. So we want to go to the page routes resource page. I have to import first routes. Okay. It's on constant. It doesn't detect this constants. It's on routes. I want to use this capital letter so I know that it's a constant, and say routes give me the resource page. Okay, and the second parameter is our parameter, which is the resource ID node.id. I hope this works. Okay, let's refresh the page. Cannot resolve React router. Okay, this router DOM. Okay, as you can see here, we have now the ID as a URL, and it will go to the resource page. So if I click on this link, it will go to the resource page because we added a link here to the resource page of that ID. Is there any question related to this? How to add links to in a page? Basically, I can show you. So if I go to routes here, I can see all the routes, and one of them is our page that we created. It's called nodes. Okay. Let's say now if I want to get resources by class, get resources by class. So this is a function already defined in resources page in services, and it's returned in the resources of a certain class. Basically, we will pass the ID of the class, and let's say I want all the research problems. If I say here classes problem. So this is one of the reasons that we defined the constants or the default classes. So you can directly get the class ID from the classes constant. So we have here graph settings, we imported classes, and classes that we have a property called problem, and it contains the ID of the class research problems. And if I refresh that page, we will see that this page will fetch the research problems instead of fetching the resources. Is there any question related to this one? Okay. What I want to do as well. Okay, let's imagine I want to add a parameter in our URL. So we will go first to our routes. We will say when the user goes to a parameter, let's name it ID, and that make that parameter optional. So if the user goes to this URL, let's say something nodes that slash problem, let's expect this is the ID of the class, and we try to load this the resources of this class. I have to change the code here, and I'm going to use another hook provided by React Router. It's called use params. Use params. Okay. And here I say, no, I want to get just the ID. Okay. Or let's call it class ID. And in the routes, we say it's called routes or class ID. And then we use this class ID inside our function. Instead of calling just the problem, we call class ID. And if I go to my page, it will load the resources of the research problems. And if I load maybe another resource, let's say C4, it will load the resources of C4. I see that I don't have any instances. Maybe DC location. Actually, I know there are some IDs of the resources in ORKG. That's why I'm just calling them directly. So you can see here that I get all the resources of the class ID DC location. So basically, we will get this ID, and it will be available on this variable called class ID. And when I call the backend, I tell, please give me the ID, the resources of the class ID, pass it in the parameter here. So basically, this is for the how to call to pass the parameter. Yeah. What about this page? I see here it doesn't load anything because there is no ID passed, but I can also test on that. So I can say if the class ID is passed, if there is a class ID, I call this endpoint, or if not, I can get all resources. Now I just get resources, and I use the same parameter. I mean the pagination and the number of items. So now you can see that when you go to slash nodes without any ID, it will load all the resources. And if I go to a specific research, like research problem, it will give me the resources of that class. Is there any question to this?
I have one. What if, so you showed use params and you got the parameter, basically the one, the main one.
Yes.
What if you have multiple?
The same way. So you can, if you know already, yeah. So okay. Maybe we have some, yeah, here we have the view paper. You see that we have the resource ID and we have the contribution ID. So it is the same. So we can say here, contribution ID. Let's add another parameter. Where is our endpoint? This is our endpoint. So basically, we will make this like mandatory, and then we say, give me the contribution ID. And anything I pass here, it will be a contribution ID. I can print it as well. Console.log contribution ID. And if I say here /test, when I check the console, I should see at least test printed. Oh, there's something wrong. Problem /test. I didn't save this one. Okay. Yeah, you see here I have test printed. So basically it rendered many times. That's why I see test many times, but it prints only the contribution ID. And I can use this also.
Query params?
For the query parents, it's different in React, so maybe I can show you. So here there is a package called query settings, and we are already have it in ORKG. If I am correct, it's called query strings here. And let me check the documentation of this package. npm. Okay, so this is how I can use it. I can say import query string, let's call it, and then import from query string. And then I can use this function, let's say just the first time, or I can use it anytime here. Parse. And okay, if I want to get to parse search, yeah, this is basically if I pass the location dot search, it will parse all the parameters. Oh, sorry. Here. Okay, let's pass this one. Location dot hash. Okay, we'll try it. Basically here, location it's not defined, and I have to use another hooks. It's defined in React router. It's called use location, and I say const location equal it's here. Yeah, it's already defined. Okay, now if I refresh the page, I see missing column. What did I forget here? Okay, just time issue. Why did I forget this? It's here, right? Location. Okay. Okay, yeah. Let's refresh, just check the console. Okay. Now let's print or put this in params and say console.log params and say here query parameter. Let's call it ID item 15. Okay.
Yeah,
you
cool.
see now this params, it will contain an object, and it parsed it as there is a key called ID item, and it contains the value 15.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Is there any other question?
Yes, Kai. Could you please explain again why did we use the hook or not the other suggestion of answer?
So we are using hooks to manage variables, and basically React will provide us as a mechanism. If we update that variable, it will re-render the component. Otherwise, it will be just a static HTML file. So if I put something here like constant equal to my variable, and let's say I put 10 here, oops, my variable, and here if I print it, okay. So each time we render this component, it will be always the same value, which is 10. And if I change the value of this variable, it will never re-render the component again. I mean, it will be always 10 because it React, when it re-render the component, it will run also the comments that are in this level or in this function. So it will be always 10. If I print here, let's say and then update it afterward, let's say my var equal to 5. It will be always 5. Yeah, as you can see here, always 5. But when I use hooks, when I update my variable using the method that I defined, it will re-render the component and it will show me the new value. So that's what happened basically in all our defined hooks here. Count, nodes, current page is loading.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Does that reply to your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Yeah. Maybe I will try to create a custom hook. So we had a question from Yasser, I guess. Okay, nodes, and then, okay, let's just define it here. Use nodes.js, and it's basically a function, or okay. And let's move our parameters from here. I will just create a custom hook for this specific. Thank you, Yasser. I will just create here a custom hook, and it will use. We will use this custom hook in our component, and we don't have to define them here. But I will just say from use nodes, get use nodes, and then I call my custom hook, but I have to return here the values. So I say return. I will return all these variables that we need in our component. Just a matter to show you how to create a custom hook. It's better way to organize the code because our or controller will have a separated. I mean, the code that controls the pagination and stuff will be separated from the code that render the view. I will try to import this here, and okay, I will copy all this. We have already count nodes, current page is loading, and we need query settings as well, maybe. Okay. Now I can say this. I put it here. Say const. And I don't need this. Okay. Yeah, maybe I need also the fetch from here. Okay. And I don't need this. Maybe I don't need also the set of this function. Basically, I will export this from here. Okay, so basically what we did, we created a custom hook. It's called use nodes, and we try to define our mechanism, how to load data from the database and how to set the result and the number of pages or the number of items. And then inside our component or the page nodes, we just use that hook, and then we print our the result. When I refresh this page, it will work in the same way, but the code of the hooks will be separated from our page. Yeah. So basically, if I update something from this hook, it will re-render because let's say the count variable changed it. So this is how we create a custom hook. Is there any question? Yeah, just to summarize, we had a tour how to or the different parts of ORKG front-end code. We added new page. As we said, we have to edit 3 pages or 3 files, which are routes and routes config, and we create new page inside the folder pages. And we created a page that lists all the resources with their creator, and we put a link to the resource page. Okay, is there any question? Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, once we end this call, it will be saved and we will share it in the Skype channel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khair.
Thank you, Basa. Bye.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
you too. Bye.